What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to the Thursday show, MLB DFS Lineup Card live for potentially the most irrelevant slate of the season. 4 games on deck tonight. Interesting little slate. I think it'll be a fun one to play, but definitely some reduced prize pools. There's some NFL contests going on, I think, for Thursday night football for preseason and stuff like that. They'll probably cut into some prize pools, but it'll be a fun one to talk through anyway. Appreciate everybody coming and hanging out for the show. Looks like we've got a full house already. We've got Larry in the chat. Matt Tomlinson's here. Podigen Stoner's here. Trey is here. Stephen B's here. Everybody seems like they burnt one before they came into the show. Everybody's talking about, looks like the afternoon slate a little bit. What's going on? Anybody do anything interesting on the afternoon slate? I didn't play it. I slept in. Had a couple beers. Wednesday night beers, usual routine. Buddy Charlie was over for a little bit. Played the online version of the poker game. Didn't win the poker game. Won the beer drinking part of the evening. Crashed out. Just kind of decided to sleep in this morning. It's a rainy, shitty day here. It's pouring out right now, so it's like nothing to do. No, even with the slow day, the light workload, getting the 4 games content done. Nothing to do. Nothing to go. Can't take Joker for a walk on a rainy, shitty day like this. So it's just a slow day inside today. But I do think, like I said, we've got an interesting slate to talk through today. Dimitri's here. Could be Travis is here. Travis is at work again. Can't burn one. Yeah, probably not a good idea. That's what edibles are for. So, it's at least a really interesting pitching slate, I think. Just to kind of get into it. We've got 2 star caliber ace level pitchers for sure. They're obvious names on the board with Clayton Kershaw and Aaron Nola. But Nola's been pitching poorly. He's in a great matchup. Kershaw is making his first start since late June. He's in the best matchup in baseball, which the one that I mentioned we were going to be chasing for the rest of the season. Buckle up, because he's going to have 70 to 75 pitches as a lefty against the Rockies tonight. And we're talking about like a lefty among lefties. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a fun one. But Kershaw, even with I put him at 5 innings, right? I figure he can get 5 innings going up against this Rockies team with 70, 75 pitches. And he tops the board for projections today. Aaron Nola's right there with him against that Nationals team, and I think that's a great spot as well, but Nola's been really struggling. Paxton is on the board, but he's been kind of a mixed bag. That Fenway Park hitting environment, there's also rain in the forecast up there. And then we've got a board made up of Matthew Liberatore, Pat Corbin, Zach Littell, Ty Black, and Austin Cox, several of whom are just acting as like openers today. So this is a complete mess of a slate on the mound. It's going to be a really interesting one to see where this breaks down, especially on DK. I kind of feel bad for people on DK. I think you're just mixing and matching shares of Kershaw, Nola, and Paxton with the cheap guys and hope for the best at your SP2 today, and maybe don't even worry about it and see if you can just win with some bats as one approach to this slate on DK, at least in a handful of lineups across 150. It's just really ugly. Yeah, Larry, I'm saying 75. They've got him at 70 across town on one of the sites. Not sure what Stokastic's thinking for him, but I haven't seen the Dodgers put a pitch count on it. But I'd be surprised if we were talking about more than 5 innings, 75 pitches. And I think he can cruise at that pitch count and on this slate relative to everybody else, even for the money. I think there's a big opportunity there for Kershaw. We've talked about about how bad the Rockies are, and I'll spoil that part of the show and just read it off now, and we'll repeat it later on. But the Rockies lineup has a 56 WRC plus as an active roster for their active roster, and it's in 892 plate appearances collectively against lefties. That ranks exactly 15th in the middle of the league. The 56 WRC plus is by far the worst in baseball for any team against either hand. And we're talking about by multiple, by double-digit points. They're worse than everybody else at creating runs. They've also got a 30.8% strikeout rate in the split against lefties. And Kershaw's a 27 to 30% strikeout pitcher when he's going right. So major opportunity for Kershaw. He also is very good at pitching clean innings. So, I mean, it's a killer spot despite the limitation of the pitch count. But, yes, there is going to be a 70 to 75 pitch count, I think, on Kershaw. Stephen Leibowitz is mentioning the weather. I do think that we get both those games in. It's weather in Boston, weather in Philly. But it seems like they're both going to play. Probably going to hit a delay in both of them at some point. It sounds more like Boston's got an actual window where they could start clean, finish clean, where Philly's got it like the rain's going to hit the ballpark right around the game time, so they might get delayed. They might late start. But it seems like there'll be some delays there. Regardless, that might actually be kind of fun if the Philly game delays by like 2 hours and starts a little later, because this slate goes 6:40, 6:40, 7:10 starts for the first 3 games, and then there's 3 hours until that Dodgers game starts. So if all these games start on time, play clean, they're just going to finish up before that Dodgers game even starts, which is interesting. It'll make Kershaw potentially a late-night hammer. It'll certainly make some of those Dodgers hitters a potential late-night hammer. We don't have either of those lineups in yet, so it'll be obviously some variables there. And I would expect that the Dodgers might get a little funky with their lineup, just rolling it out against a nothing pitcher in Ty Blach. So it'll be fun to break down. But let's see who else. Anybody else join? Jake's here. Lone Wolf. There's Lone Wolf. Just waiting for Lone Wolf to join. I know he was in the Discord earlier talking about coming here for the show. Larry says Nola screws me all the time. Yeah, he's not been good this year. This will be. Trey says Washington will end up hitting Nola and win the slate. That's not off the board. All the offenses. So people were talking about, maybe we talk a little bit about how do you approach a slate like this? How do you build for it? And for me, I want to cast a big wide net over offense on most slates anyway. I'm always trying to get to a big broad spread of bats, either with or against the field and, relative to where the field is. But on a slate like this, it's such an opportunity to just be able to cover everything. 8 teams in play, you can easily cover all the bats across a full portfolio of lineups. Not all the combinations, obviously, but you can cover a lot of the different opportunities, a lot of the different bats, and a lot of the important key combinations of hitters. You can get to and exploit some positional shortages. So I was looking at it as I was writing the article today, and we lost one because Contreras isn't playing for the Cards, but arguably Knizer's just as good a power hitter. So catcher is actually, I think, deeper than second base and shortstop today in terms of just having more viable options. Shortstop and second base have higher peaks. You've got Bobby Witt. You've got Mookie Betts with second base and shortstop eligibility on the FanDuel slate, in addition to outfield second base eligibility on DK. So there are strong options in those middle infield spots. But I think catcher is a position where you can do some funky things as like a one-off where you need it on DK. Go to guys like Keibert Ruiz. Will Smith probably is going to be pretty popular in that Dodgers lineup, but Elias Diaz on the other side of that, if you wanted to take some shots against Kershaw, which I do think is probably viable. You'll get into the Dodgers bullpen a little bit. So I think catcher's a position at which you can look individually for some upside, and then you can look for either just go to the premium options at those positions like second base or shortstop, or you can move some pieces around the board and use guys like Bryson Stott, working him in at second base. He'll probably be fairly popular in that popular Philly stack, but he's a mix and match part. They've also got a guy named Weston Wilson who's got shortstop eligibility for the dead minimum at the bottom of that Phillies lineup today. So there's a lot of movable parts positionally on this slate. So I think you can look for some advantages that way if you're using like a one-off positionally. I think it's a short slate like this also welcomes the opportunity to build I prefer full stack approaches or full stack with a one-off, like a 4-3-1 on FanDuel kind of a configuration. On a slate like this, especially this one, the way this one just kind of falls together, I do think there's a lot of opportunity to maybe you're building 3-3-1-1 type stacks on FanDuel. More opportunity to build like a 5-1-1-1 type of a stack and use some positional advantages on the DK slate. That's where some of the mix and matching of catchers comes in. So there's a lot of different approaches to it. I think it's a slate that welcomes some creativity of lineup building. So if you're hand building especially, I do think it pays to just, kind of sit there and move things around and just see what kind of unique constructions you can get to. And I'm going to make one different decision at this position to try and capitalize on an ownership advantage, a cost advantage, whatever the case might be, and then act from there. So put in that move, then put in your top pitcher, and then start building out like whatever stack you want, see where you're at with your money. Maybe you build in your SP2 at that point, and then you take your other 2 one-offs, or you take 2 guys in a 5-2-1. So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can put things together on this slate, and it comes together really interestingly. Obviously, if you embrace some risk on the mound, there's certainly some opportunities for you today, but it's really low end. So if you're getting to that, like I said before, I think you just kind of want to dive in and get to a spread across. I'll put it up on the screen. You kind of want to just get to a spread across like these guys if you're just mix and matching value guys. Like, just use them all and just throw them into the bag. Except for the idea that, who are the short starters? I got to remember because there were multiple guys who were not pitching full innings. Black is one of them, I think. Black went 5 and then went 4 2/3. So he's got 5-inning upside. And then the kid from the Royals is acting as an opener. And then Alec Marsh is coming in. Austin Cox is the opener. Probably 2 innings. And then Alec Marsh. Either way, you're firing away with Red Sox bats in that spot. So Cox from the bottom. This is a 2-inning projection. Ty Black, I'm figuring, I mean, the Dodgers will probably chase him anyway before he gets to 5 innings, but I think he's capped at 5. And then Zach Littell is also acting as an opener, is he not? 5 starts, a few innings into the bullpen. He's made 2 full starts of 5 and 6 innings. Okay, that's right. Yeah, so Littell has upside to a full start, 6 innings. He's been stretched out a little bit. So he went 5 innings and 6 innings in the last 2 games. And we'll talk about his upside. So he is actually technically on the board. He ranks 3rd from the bottom. That also puts him 6th overall. And then Liberatore's just been bad, but he's obviously getting a full start. The other guys are a little bit more known commodities. So it's just an ugly, ugly pitching slate outside of hopefully Kershaw if he gets the 75 pitches and does well, obviously. And then Nola needs to perform against the Nats. After that, it's really mixed bag. So diving into the first of the game by game. This is the first one, right? Yeah. So I mentioned a little bit of weather concern in this one, but it seems like it's going to play. It's one of those situations where it's like rain during the scheduled time of the beginning of the game, and then it's going to clear, and there's going to be an open window the rest of the way. So I do think there's a good opportunity to go to this game. Obviously, it comes down heavy on the Philly side. First, it's Aaron Nola, 10-5, 10,000. He projects at the very top of the board alongside Clayton Kershaw, obviously in a better opportunity to pitch. Not necessarily a complete game, but deep into the game. 7 innings is easily on the board for Aaron Nola if he's going right. Complete game is certainly on the board for Aaron Nola if he's going really right against this team. That said, he's dipped to a 25.1% strikeout rate after being in the 29% range over the past 2 seasons. His walks are up a little bit from a spectacular 3 and change last year to a 5 and change this year. 5.8% this year. 1.14 whip. Still not bad at like keeping himself clean, keeping himself out of trouble. A 4.58 ERA. He's given up some odd runs. He's definitely given up some odd power this year. 4.44% home runs on 8.4% barrels, 89 miles an hour. Exit velo, but still in a 3.81 xFIP. He's been pitching okay. Not good. Not completely awful most of the time. He typically, if he gives up a couple runs, continues to work through the game in many of these starts. So he's covered 143 in a third innings in 23 starts. He's just the most reliable guy by far for a deep start. So if we're just looking at innings alone as a differentiator on this slate, which I think is important to do, Aaron Nola makes a ton of sense to have a pretty big investment in. He's, I'm sure, going to be the most popular pitcher on both sites. And I think it's totally warranted. I'm hoping to get away with some Kershaw under-owned against that Rockies lineup and get my 75 pitches and get out with a competitive score to what Aaron Nola does at massive popularity. I'm sure Kershaw will also be owned. He'll probably be the 3rd most highly owned behind Nola and probably Paxton ahead of him, I would think. Pat Corbin on the other side, 78, 75. It's a massive spot for the Phillies offense. But I do think short slate necessitates having some Patrick Corbin in your life. One of the more reliable out of, 2 of those guys are short starting. 2 of them are terrible. And then one of them's Pat Corbin. A 5.03 ERA, a 4.55 xFIP, a 15.2% strikeout rate this season, 8.8% barrels. Home runs are back up at 4.10%, 90.9 miles an hour, so pushing 91 miles an hour of exit velo, 45% hard hits. It's not pretty for Pat Corbin. He was at 18% strikeouts last year. He was still giving up a ton of barrels and hard hits, but he wrangled home runs a little bit. Like below 4% is not completely disastrous in terms of the home run rate. Back above it this year, obviously was super, super targetable 2 years ago at 4.93, which is just absurd that season. But extremely targetable over the last few seasons. I do think at 7,500, 7,800, you can throw a few value darts at it, though, on this slate. Just given the nature of the slate, I'll definitely have a little bit on the FanDuel slate. Presumably owned in like the mid-single digits, I would think. Maybe creeps up above into the low double digits on the DK slate. Easy enough to get ahead of the field, but I don't even know if you want to do that. It's such a good opportunity for the Phillies offense. Kyle Schwarber up top, 14.7%, barrels 46.5%, hard hits, 30 home runs on the season. Nothing not to love about Kyle Schwarber. Looking at his lefty, he's got a 30 home runs, 250 ISO. 11 of the 30 home runs have come in just 167 plate appearances, so like a third of it, 30% of his plate appearances. 11 of the 30 home runs, so that adds up. So he really doesn't lose anything. He draws fewer walks, but he's still got a really, really good walk rate against lefties. It's 17.5% against righties, but 13.2% walk rates. That's still a spectacular walk rate. His ISO actually goes up in same-handed matchups. It's 248 against righties and 254 against lefties this year. WRC plus is 98, but I'll take the power. I'm just looking for power from Kyle Schwarber. Going from him into a stack that includes Alec Bohm for cheap prices, Nicky Castellanos for cheap prices, Bryson Stott for cheap prices. That's pretty effective. Helps offset the price of Bryce Harper. Just averages it right down on the DK slate. All of these guys are affordable on the FanDuel slate, too. This is an easy team to build with on FanDuel. You get third base, first base eligibility from Bohm, first base outfield from Harper on that site. First and third from Bohm on DK, but only first base for Harper on that site. Weston Wilson, who I mentioned at the bottom of the lineup, 2,000, third base and shortstop eligible on DK, third base only on FanDuel. 3 plate appearances. He's got a home run and a stolen base so far. He is 28 years old, I want to say? 28-year-old non-prospect, making his 4th MLB plate appearance. But he had a good first 3. I do think he's in play, obviously. We're playing a lot of these lineups, just 1 through 9, trying to get some value late in lineups, trying to differentiate ownership. At that price alone, if you're just booking a positional, lock in a mid price positionally and move on and hope that you get a hit out of it, I think Weston Wilson's on the board. These guys through the middle of the lineup, Trey Turner underperforming badly on the season, but could instantly turn the Phillies into an even better team if he turns the lights on a little bit. 11 homers and 22 stolen bases, not inept for counting stats, just not Trey Turner level. 51 could arguably be a little cheaper on the DK slate. 29 on FanDuel, excellent option at shortstop, just given the talent for the value. JT Realmuto, excellent catcher option. Hopefully, maybe sneaks past later in the lineup with a lot of appeal for the top several hitters there. Maybe sneaks through, but probably not as much on DK. Definitely a viable option at 2,900 on the FanDuel slate, despite not needing catchers. Johan Rojas at the bottom of the lineup, 2,300, 2,400. Mix in value, 321, 357, 377 with a 102 WRC plus. 5 steals over his first 58 plate appearances this year. Not bad. Everything, you can throw the kitchen sink at Patrick Corbin. This is a team where you roster it as much or as little as you want versus the field. They have a 5.66 run total today. All the home teams, by the way, are not only favored, they're all carrying run totals over 5.5. So the Phillies, the Rays, the Red Sox, and the Dodgers are all over 5.5, with the Red Sox like a run higher than everybody else at 6.5. So it's a really slanted slate toward the home teams today. You can get a little different, maybe pick up some plate appearances by playing those road teams. And like I said, I just want to throw a net over as much of the slate, as much of the probable outcomes as I can. Which does mean that we're playing some Nationals bats. CJ Abrams off the top, 4,300, 3,100, 95 WRC plus on the season overall, 11 home runs, 27 steals, and really caught on fire in that leadoff role when they gave him that promotion. He's got a 132 WRC plus, slashing 321, 369, 491 as the leadoff hitter this year over 124 plate appearances. So he's been really, really good in that leadoff role. Gets on base at a great clip to set the table for a really disappointing lineup that follows him. But you do have Lane Thomas, 284, 329, 487 on the season, 117 WRC plus, 203 ISO, 20 homers, 15 steals. At least a serviceable part. He's a little high priced at 3,700 on the FanDuel slate. You're still paying for a lot of what he did earlier in the season. He cooled off a little bit, but he sustained a decent, this is easily the best player on this team. 45 on DK is perfectly fair, and everybody else on the team is cheap, so it's easy enough to get to him in stacks. I do think Lane Thomas is a viable one-off. I do think CJ Abrams is an interesting positional one-off, given his pricing, given the shortstop eligibility. You just plug him in at shortstop as a one-off, and you build around that. And it pivots things to a lower-owned shortstop who does have talent, who does have potential. Joker's thumping his foot on the floor over there, scratching an itch. He's obviously enthusiastic about it. Obviously, drawing against Aaron Nola, you're going into a not good matchup there. But you do that. That's why you're getting a decent player at low ownership in a leadoff role at a key position. So that's one of the spots I think you can find some differentiation. The middle of the lineup is good. Like Joey Meneses, good hit tool, 279, 325, 419. Creator runs exactly at league average, hitting for a little bit more power over the last couple of weeks. So he's up to 11 home runs. Still only a 140 ISO on the season, but he makes pretty good, reliable contact, sturdy contact, only 19.7% strikeouts, 6.5% walks. So he's putting the ball in play a lot for 3,600, 2,900 at first base. Keibert Ruiz, 3,700, 2,500, I do think is an interesting pivot point at catcher. If they get to Aaron Nola, Keibert Ruiz hitting cleanup is probably going to be a part of it. 6.5% barrels, only 33.6% hard hits, 12 home runs on the season, a 389 slug. I believe the X slug is still a little bit better than the slugging percentage. So just lurking power there from the switch hitting catcher. I do like Keibert Ruiz as a catcher option. Another spot where maybe you grab a one-off on a catcher, or maybe you're putting like CJ Abrams and Keibert Ruiz in as a two-man and then grabbing an expensive one-off at a different position and then building another five-man on DK. A lot of different ways to put some things together with these different, these lower-owned, cheap kind of hitters who do have talent. Dominic Smith doesn't really have that much talent. 4.9% barrels, 29.2% hard hits on the season. 15.4% strikeouts is good. That's a very limited strikeout rate. He's another guy who does put the ball in play well. 266, 338, 345. Only moderately effective. The batting average is fine. The 338 on base percentage is okay. If he was giving us anything else in terms of like power or some run creation ability. 90 WRC plus, a .079 ISO, 5 home runs. Not a great hitter at first base. 2,300, 2,500. He's definitely going to help differentiate some offense or some ownership rather at first base if you use him. But not a good option. Ildemaro Vargas, Jake Alou, Alex Call from the bottom of the lineup, all like mix and match parts. Not all that good. The guy who I am kind of interested in, and I think he's an interesting cheap one-off late in the lineup, is Blake Rutherford. Former first round pick. In the minors this season. Where is it? It's in the article. Article's up on rotoscouts. He's got a minus 100 WRC plus in 14 plate appearances so far on the show. He's a former first round pick. Moderate numbers over time in the minors over the past couple of seasons, but so far this year, 120 AAA plate appearances after a promotion from AA. In AA, he had made 141 plate appearances, slashed 341, 396, 12 with a 271 ISO and 7 home runs. Moved up to the AAA, made 120 plate appearances, 349, 400, 547 with a 198 ISO and 4 home runs. So he's having a nice year at the plate. Post-hype kind of a guy, was never top end prospect, but was a first round pick. Does have raw talent. So for the dead minimum on DK for 21 on FanDuel, I'm kind of interested in that lefty just sneakily down the bottom of the lineup. I'm sure he won't be that popular. Terrible matchup going up against Nola. Over 14 plate appearances, he's got a 0.00, 0.00, 0.00 triple slash with no home runs, no runs scored, no RBIs, no stolen bases, a 0 ISO, and a negative 100 WRC plus. Limited option. He's very cheap. So this one was enthusiasm about the Phillies bats, enthusiasm about Aaron Nola, despite the bumps, even with ownership on him. I think it's just such a short slate, you kind of got to go there. Nationals bats definitely in play as a lower-owned hedge position against Nola shares, contrarian lineup that you can use with a couple interesting one-offs. Even Lane Thomas and Joey can be somewhat interesting. Nationals stack-wise, it's really these guys and this guy, in my opinion. Obviously, if you're building, 20 of them, you're working in some Dom Smith, you're working in some Jake Alou, some Ildemaro Vargas, but very low-end options there. Philly stack, my favorite version of it would probably be like, if I'm on DK, I'll include Real Muto. And then maybe I differentiate by going to Wilson, but obviously Stott is the better player. But like if you went Schwarber, Harper Castellanos, and Real Muto with Stott, That's a 49.60 average with a 24,800 total for the 5 players. Instead of Stott, if you differentiate, go to a lower owned guy, or maybe he'll be similarly owned given the discount. But at 2,000 at dead minimum, it makes it a 4,460 average and a 22.3 total. So a nice little piece of differentiation there. Not a great hitter. We're not calling for 2 home runs or a continued, 1,000 batting average, 1,000 on base. So I guess he got 3 hits. Good for him. So, low-end option down there, but cheap. Moving on. All right, so this was Zach Littell potentially getting 5-6 innings, full start. He's made 5 starts, 35 2/3. Let me pull him back up here. Come on, Fangraphs. All right, so he was working primarily as a reliever. A lot of 1s and 2s, but a multi-inning capable guy. Made a full start on the 19th, 4 appearances ago, rather. 3 1/3, 1 earned run, a home run, 4 strikeouts. Then made a relief appearance, 2 innings, on the 23rd. A full start on the 30th where he went 5 innings. A full start on the 4th where he went 6 innings against the Tigers. The one on the 30th was against the Astros. 4 strikeouts in that one. 1 strikeout in the Tigers game against that really low-end team, but he kept them off the board. 3 hits over 6 innings. Was somewhat effective. Gave up 2 runs, 8 hits to that Astros team. On the idea that he's one of the guys who's going to throw some innings today, probably, if things go well, I do think you could throw some darts at him at 6,900 on DK where you need 2 pitchers. I don't think you need to go out of your way that much for him on FanDuel at 7,200. The Cards are oddly at 4.08 run total against this pitcher. He's got a 4.04 ERA at 3.55 xFIP in his 35 2/3 innings, 5 starts, 20.3% strikeouts, only 3.9% walks. The whip is high for a guy with only 3.9% walks. It's a tiny, tiny sample, though. But what I'm kind of focusing in on is the 9.5% barrel rate, the 50.9% hard hit so far. Only 2.61% home runs, but 92 miles an hour of exit velo. The launch angle, moderate. Like, he's obviously focused on keeping it down, but it's only moderate success so far. So getting a lot of power here for the top of the Cards lineup. I think it's a good spot for DFS purposes. And I really like these 5 hitters. Lars Nootbaar, very effective leadoff hitter. 278, 378, 448, 170 ISO, 130 WRC plus. Ahead of the star core with the power. Nolan Gorman was my overall home run pick of the day. 14.72 on the board. Arenado over the magic number. Goldschmidt over the magic number. 18 home runs for Goldie, 124 WRC plus, 24 each for Gorman and Arenado, 124 WRC plus, 125 WRC plus. This top end is excellent. It's not their fault that this team is not as good as it should be. Tyler O'Neill, it's partly his fault. He's missed a lot of the season, only 161 plate appearances. I mean, injuries aren't necessarily his fault. It's just how he's built. 5 home runs, 2 steals. Was a major source of power 2 years ago. Hitter that I really like getting to when he's healthy. 3,700, 2,600 going up against the premium contact available. That's a pretty big power bat to be able to get against that kind of contact. Might go in there and strike out twice, but also might hit a home run in his 3rd plate appearance or 1st plate appearance, however you want to look at it. 13.4% barrels, 45.4% hard hits in the tiny sample. I really like O'Neill for the cheap pricing. 3,700, 2,600. That's a discount for that hitter. Burleson's fine. Neisner's interesting. 2,700, 2,600. I think he's viable on both sites. 8 home runs and only 146 plate appearances. 9.6% barrels, decent little barrel rate. 26% strikeouts, only 2.7% walks. So it's really, we're looking to buy cheap power at the catcher spot that'll probably go low owned given the low run total for the Cards, given the, not being Wilson Contreras. Cheap, easy to get to. I do think Neisner's in play here. 9.97 in the home run model. Puts him right at the magic number, basically. Sneaky home run play there. Kind of like that. Definitely playable on the FanDuel slate, especially, in card stacks. I don't know if I'm going out of my way to one-off Neisner that many times. Maybe a couple. I do think there's viability there. Taylor Motter, not as much, but he's the dead minimum. Another spot where you can just say, like, hey, second base, just put the min price guy there, hope he gets a hit. Even if you're doing that in a one-off situation, it's not ideal. I'd obviously rather go to a $2,000 or $2,100 really cheap player that's actually like on the team that I'm focused on stacking. But you can do that on this slate at second base. I wouldn't do it at third base, but he's viable at both second and third on both sites. So I think it's a spot where, like, if he goes out, gets 2 hits, happens to score a run, for the minimum price at a position like second base on this slate specifically, that gives you a little bit of value, and it makes your lineup a little bit more dynamic compared to the public, where not many people are going to do that with Taylor Motter as a one-off. So you're just creating a unique situation where you can build out 2 different things. Maybe you're getting to both expensive pitchers, or whatever you want to do. Ray's side of things, going up against Liberator, major opportunity. He is a wildly different pitcher from the show. Somebody was mentioning it in the chat. Wildly different pitcher from the show to the minor leagues. Let's see what's going on over here, though. Before we get into that, let's say hi to Alan S. Alan S. is asking if anybody wants to fade Nola. Look, I think it's you're certainly viable in that he's been struggling, not been himself by, demonstrably not quite himself this season. And you're getting away from all that ownership. I just think that the field of pitchers is way too short to just full fade anybody from the top. It's really tough to say if you take Nola off the board, like, where are you putting those shares? My inclination would just be to load up on more Clayton Kershaw, but that's not safe because we're only dealing with a limited pitch count in his first outing back. I love the spot. I'm going to take a huge portion of it on FanDuel and be way over the field, I'm sure. But I don't know that it's a spot where you want to say, like, all right, instead of having 40 Aaron Nola shares, I'm going to dump all that into getting to like 90% Clayton Kershaw. That might be pushing it. Stretching out for Paxton might be pushing it. Guy like Liberator is a massive question mark. Obviously, doesn't project great. Projects playably for 5,700, 6,100 here. There's not really that much justification in the show for it, but he does have the idea of talent. He's a fairly highly regarded young pitcher. In the majors, he's got a 5.92 xFIP underneath that ugly 6.93 ERA, so a run better, but still atrociously bad. He's got a 12.6% strikeout rate, a 9.8% walk rate over 37 2/3 and 9 starts this season. Just hasn't delivered in any of his starts in any way whatsoever. 43.8% hard hits, 90 plus miles an hour of exit velo, only a 2.19% home run rate. That maybe is what you're chasing, maybe a limiting factor there for home run power, but it's a very small sample, and given the premium contact, I don't know how much I buy in. 13.2 degree average launch angle doesn't really support the limitations of home runs. Seems like he's got a little bit lucky so far to limit home runs like that. Last year, 34 2/3 innings, 17.4% strikeouts, a worse walk rate, a higher home run rate on similar, mid-range trajectory, a lot of barrels, tons of hard hits, tons of exit velo. Bad across the board in the show. This season, though, in AAA, this year, in 11 starts at AAA, that exact same pitcher has a 3.72 ERA, a 3.97 xFIP, and a 29.7% strikeout rate in 58 innings over 11 starts. That's just so dramatically different. It defies belief almost that he would be that much higher for strikeouts in AAA. It's AAA. It's not the majors, obviously, but there's a lot of talent at AAA. To be doing it at that big a difference, 17 percentage points basically, that's wild. But he has been super targetable, and the Rays are a deep, capable offense that gets on base very well, that hits for power, that steals bases. It's just a bad spot for Liberator. I do think you have to play some shares. 5,700 is a great price as an SP2. Like I said, you're putting all those SP2s into the washing machine, and you're just letting them tumble however they may, I think, on that DK slate, in conjunction with just shitty pitcher, high-end pitcher, shitty pitcher, high-end pitcher. Just take what you get. And he's one of the cheapest in the bunch, if not the cheapest in the bunch, who's got actual upside to a full start. So just given that, I think he's on the board. But it's a really thin opportunity, really thin path to success. I greatly prefer the Rays bats. Yandy Diaz off the top, 5,000, 3,500. His price has come down despite still sitting 318, 399, 507, a 158 WRC plus, 16 homers. Excellent in terms of strikeouts and walks, 16.3, 10.8. Puts the ball in play. Either he's putting the ball in play with a 50+% hard hit rate and a very good batting average, or he's getting on base, drawing a walk. Like he is a very premium player at the top of this lineup. Wander Franco for 59.36, a little tiny discount for this player. 16 homers, 29 steals, 126 WRC plus. Kind of cooled a little bit after, like most of this team, after a dramatic start. They cooled through July, but there's still a lot of great workable parts, and the entire end of the lineup is cheap on both sites. So outside of the 3 stars, who really aren't even that expensive, 16.3 for the 3 for Diaz, Franco, and Rosarena off the top on DK. 10.5 for them on FanDuel. Average price of $3,500. That's pretty cheap for considering you're getting Wander Franco and Randy Rosarena in there. That's pretty cheap for those 2 players. 16 homers, 29 steals for Franco, 18 and 12 for Rosarena, 9 and 4 in a good season in 299 plate appearances for very cheap Harold Ramirez hitting cleanup. That's a capable bat. 296, 344, 442, a 146 ISO, 122 WRC plus. More of a line drive hitter. Hit 9 early home runs this season. I was saying, like, wow, that's a surprising home run output so far because he's more of a line drive hitter. He's come back to earth with that. 4.5% barrels. That's about who he is. 4.8% last year. 18.7% strikeouts and 6.4% walks, though. A guy who puts the ball in play and hits it fairly hard and is a very productive hitter behind these guys with all their strong on-base skills. That's an average on-base percentage of 367 for those 3 stars ahead of him. So he's a very capable 4th banana in that stack there. Isaac Paredes, Jose Siri, obviously outrageous power output this season. 22 homers and 23 homers in 388 and 281 plate appearances. Either one of those guys, both of those guys, they mix and match well. They both go into stacks for cheap, 4,000, 3,800, 3,100, 3,000. Surprising totals in such short plate appearances, but both guys have believable power ceilings. It's not totally shocking to see like these guys having these home run totals for a season. It is a little surprising that it came so quickly in so few plate appearances. So maybe it cools off the rest of the way and they normalize and they just end up around like 25 apiece for the by the end of the season. But a 252 ISO, a 303 ISO, they're undeniable options for cheap prices, especially Paredes with triple position eligibility at 3,100 on the FanDuel slate. That's just an asset in this matchup against Liberatore. Just thinking of all the contact that Liberatore is allowing. Leaving out just the 2.19% home runs, just all the premium contact, but just all the contact, regardless of quality, at 12.6% strikeouts. He's just throwing the ball up to be hit. Curtis Mead, interesting option late in the lineup, 2,100 across sites, third base eligible on both sites. Curtis Mead, nothing in 11 plate appearances in the show, but was slashing 291, 379, 453 with a 162 ISO, 12.8% walks, 14.7% strikeouts, 3 homers, 3 steals, and 211 plate appearances at AAA. Hit 13 home runs, stole 7 bases across 331 plate appearances in AA and AAA last season. Premium prospect, their top prospect, supposed to be a good hitter. Not necessarily a massive source of power, but good mid-range, mid-teens type power. Kind of fits in with the team theme here. Some pretty good power, some pretty good speed, good hit tool, good on-base ability. That's Curtis Mead. So for 2,100 at third base, definitely a discount option in that position. Again, hasn't done much with 11 plate appearances. At least he's not at zeros across the board, though. Manny Margot, Christian Bethancourt, mix and match type pieces late in the lineup. The card side of things, I talked through most of it. I did leave Tommy Edman out, 3,600, 2,600, triple position eligible on the FanDuel slate, dual position eligible on the DK slate. Another good source of value and a good mix and match piece through that middle infield positioning. Second base and shortstop, I think you've got a lot of opportunity to use just differentiated guys for cheap prices. And Tommy Edman's been a good source of counting stats over time. 7 homers and 15 steals and 339 this year. Below average for run creation this year in the half-season sample. Last year, 108 WRC plus, 13 homers, 32 stolen bases, and 630. Year before, 11 and 30, 91 WRC plus, and 691. Has been a little limited this year by injuries. Is an up-and-down performer, but I think with very low ownership, cheap prices late in the lineup, all this positional flexibility on both sites, Tommy Edman's part of my plans because I'm going to have a fair amount of Cardinal stacks given all this power. And I think he wraps around nicely to all that power, too. So I think very effective options up and down for the Cards. So it's Cards bats, Rays bats for me, but it's Rays bats, Cards bats for Vegas. I think it's a coin flip either way. I think both teams should be prioritized. I'm just seeing a little bit more power for the Cards. either one of the pitchers in I'm just rostering value, I'm just rostering the cheap price and moving along and hope I get a handful of innings and maybe a couple of strikeouts at either one of these guys. Probably Littell's slightly higher end, given that Vegas favors his side of things, given that he's got the better strikeout rate, arguably more talent in the show right now. If Liberatore stumbles into being that guy that we've seen in AAA, then he's obviously got an opportunity to post a really good score, but we have not seen that guy in the show yet. So very dicey, very thin path to success with either starter. See what's going on in the chat. Matt Tomlin said, yeah, Enrique Hernandez bobblehead night in Boston last night despite being traded to the Dodgers 2 weeks ago. Pretty funny. I guess if you just got him like sitting there, like, why not ship him to Los Angeles? Cut some kind of a deal with Los Angeles, like the Billy Beane trade where he had to, where the Indians back then had to pay for his soda. I think it was the Indians. Had to pay for his soda in that trade that's famously in Moneyball. Do a deal like that where, like, you gotta buy our baseballs for the next 2 years and we'll ship you the Enrique Hernandez bobbleheads and you can paint them and give them away in your stadium. Bidding for both Enrique and Chris Taylor on Jock Market. Need an intervention. I like both those spots. I like Chris Taylor quite a bit better. I imagine you get more competition competing for Chris Taylor, but it's just like a low-end guy who is not going to get bid up very high, even if you get any competition on Jock Market over there. Enrique Hernandez over time has been a guy with a decent ability to put the ball in play, if nothing else. Moderate home run hitter is like a utility man. So I don't hate it. It hasn't been good at all this year, but I don't completely hate it. Chuck Deuces says on FanDuel there's a 7% difference between the Dodgers and Tampa Bay in ownership. That's a pretty big difference. David Justice, we have to pay for soda. Yeah. There you go, Larry. Welcome to Oakland, DJ. That movie's been on a ton this month on, let's say, Showtime or whatever. Just one of my cable channels that I flip through while I write these articles. So obviously, as I'm writing about baseball day after day, I'm just like, oh, Moneyball's on again. I just keep going back to that. So many good baseball moments. So many good lines in that movie, though. What's his face? Aaron Sorkin script. So obviously, extremely well written. And just, I like Brad Pitt. I like Jonah Hill. Just well acted. What's his face? One of his last performances, Philip Seymour Hoffman, I think, before he died. Did I ever tell you guys the story about when I ran into Philip Seymour Hoffman in Carnegie Deli in New York City at like 3 o'clock in the morning after being out drinking all night? We're out. It was a work party, actually. It was, I don't think it was a Christmas party. I think it was some other thing that we threw together. But maybe it was Christmas, actually. It was also the night we saw Don King there. I think it might have been Christmas. Like a work Christmas party or a holiday party. So around that time of the year, not actually on Christmas. It would be weird if I was in Carnegie Deli at 3 a.m. on Christmas. So we're out. We do the work party thing. Booze our faces off. It's open bar, it's open food and all of that stuff. But, everybody hangs out after the 3 hours of open bar and everything. We continue drinking and partying at the bar that this thing was at. We're having a great time. We close out the bar and now everybody's hungry again. So a few of us pile in a cab, or maybe, I think we took a cab. I'm not sure why. It wasn't that far. Oh, I remember why. Because our marketing director lady was with us and we didn't want to make her walk. Because we're nice. So we took a cab up to Carnegie Deli. Walk in there, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I walk up to like the front area and there's like a person with his back turned to me, just right in front of us. And he's talking to like the person who works there. I'm just going to say like, I want to grab a table. So he goes up, I walk up and he turns around all of a sudden and it's Philip Seymour Hoffman. And I'm like, I didn't say anything, but like in my head, I go, oh shit, it's Philip Seymour Hoffman. And he looks at me and he's got like bleary eyes. He was fucked out of his skull. I don't know what he was on, but clearly he was on a lot of things, as he got toward the end of his life. So just out of his skull, bleary-eyed, just like hovering like this as he shouldered his way past me, and I gave him like, I love your work. And that was the one time I met Philip Seymour Hoffman. I think later that year it was when he passed away. But then we went in, we sat down, got the gigantic sandwiches. Larry just said mile-high sandwiches. Those gigantic, like chicken salad, turkey club, like those huge sandwiches. So we got a couple of those for the table. And we're sitting there. And then all of a sudden into the room with like a little entourage around him walks Don King in full Don King American flag suspenders, 2 little American flags, literally 2 American flags in his hand. I've got the picture. I can show it to you guys. Don King, 3 o'clock in the morning in Carnegie Deli. sat down, took a picture with our marketing lady. Like, just the weirdest. That's what I love about New York City. But that's my Philip Seymour Hoffman encounter. It was a weird one. Had that. I don't have a ton of celebrity encounter stories. I think it was 2003 series against the Red Sox. Might have been the 2004 one that they lost. I was at both of those game sevens, Yankees, Red Sox. I think it was the 2003 series. There's a chance it was also one of the playoff series in years prior. But in my memory, it's riding the subway, the D train, up to the 2003 Yankees Red Sox game 7. Quite literally, there's a man standing like this, holding on, strap hanger type deal on the subway, and my face was like here in his armpit, right? I'm just like all up in his armpit, and that man was actor Matthew Modine. Also gave him a love your work. Greg B. and Cohn says, saw Philip in Death of a Salesman. Unreal. Oh, amazingly talented guy. Actually, that sounds like a pretty good show to have seen. Amazing talent, though. Yeah, it's sad that he's gone. Very, very good actor. Even back to like Boogie Nights, the first thing I really remember him from. He popped up in a few things. Like I think he was in School Ties in the background and a couple other spots. But Boogie Nights was the first thing I really remembered him from. Playing like creepy, what was his name? Freddy? Who hangs around the set and like ogles all the dudes and everything. And just wears those like little shorts and has his belly sticking out. It was just such a like weird, like skeezy, like uncomfortable dude that he was playing. Capote, he was great in that. Yeah. Talented dude. Anyway, let's look at James Paxton, Austin Cox. So, like I said, Cox acting as an opener, might get 2 innings. Not a lot of upside. Making a third start of his career, appearing in an opener role, 27 2/3 between the bullpen and the rotation, a 3.58 ERA, 4.89 xFIP, 20.7% strikeouts, 12.6% walks, 45.2% hard hits, 11.5% barrels. Excuse me, the 11.5% barrels was, I jumped down a line as I was reading this. That was Alec Marsh's barrel rate, who's going to be coming into the game after Austin Cox. So Cox maybe gets 2 innings before he hands off to Marsh. Marsh comes in with a 6.75 ERA, a 5.40 xFIP, 24.4% strikeout rate is decent, but he's got a 7.63% home run rate on those 11.5% barrels in his 28 innings, 6 starts this year. So both of these pitchers are really dicey. I don't think you get any kind of depth out of Austin Cox at 53, 6,000. I just don't see it to pay off even those prices. Very, very limited opportunity. And then you get Marsh in there. This is just going to give us his stats. He's 6,000, 7,000. So maybe you're buying a little bit of strikeout potential, but like 4 or 5 innings going up against this Red Sox lineup in this hitter's environment, I just don't really see it. So I think out of all the differentiated pitching spots, this is probably one that's maybe doesn't really pay to use. Maybe you just kind of go to the other guys that are on the board there. Between the 2 Royals pitchers, I think the one I would mix in is Marsh, just on the idea that maybe if he's going all right, he pitches a few innings. But it's super questionable with the Red Sox carrying a 6.4 plus in the implied run total. Confirmed version of the Sox lineup, Pablo Reyes leading off, 2,600, 2,100, another potential pivot point at second base and shortstop on both sites for very cheap prices at the top of the highest total lineup in the slate today, on the slate today. He'll probably draw a lot of popularity in that spot, I would think. You're talking about a guy with a 321, 363, 417, a 112 WRC plus over his first 92 plate appearances this year. Not all that much to speak of in, 16 last year, 87 the year before. Homer, 4 steals, 87 WRC plus, only a 103 ISO. A positional option, a very cheap play atop a lineup that runs into Rafi Devers, Adam Duvall, Tristan Casas, all of their power upside. It's just a great positional, correlated scoring, cheap play. Easy to make at the top of Red Sox stacks. I think you can one-off him if you want to for cheap prices to differentiate that second base position in particular. I think it's an interesting option to do that. Shortstop less so because you've got guys like Bobby Witt. You do have some decent shortstops on this slate. In this lineup, too, you've also got Trevor Story, second base and shortstop eligible on both sites. And you definitely don't want to preclude Trevor Story shares in favor of Pablo Reyes all that many times. Story, obviously hasn't been great yet in his 2 games back. 8 plate appearances, zeros across the board, a negative 100 WRC plus, as we saw with that other dude. 75% strikeout rate, not good at all, but he's Trevor Story. He's got a very long track record of power, very long track record of success, part of which is, of course, field. We've talked about it a couple times already over the last 2 days. I'm going right back to the well with Trevor Story. I actually do hope that the public starts stumbling into more shares of Pablo Reyes since he's cheap at the top of the lineup and Story's been disappointing over the last 2 days. That just leads me to more shares of Trevor Story. 8.73 in the home run model. Nothing at all to speak of this year, but multiple seasons over, 25, 30 home runs, 30 plus, 35. 32 and 35, I think, were his 2 high points. Alex Verdugo, Jaron Duran sliding down the lineup down here with Duran with the lefty opener, but then they'll get the right-handed Alec Marsh, so I don't really mind going to the lefties. I like Verdugo's bat overall. A little bit of a down season for him, only 8 homers, a 110 WRC plus. Not much power to speak of, but 275, 348, only a 15% strikeout rate, 8.9% walk. So he's another guy just puts the ball in play a lot. Jaron Duran's been doing everything right this year. 8 homers, 23 steals, 26% better than average creating runs, a 196 ISO, 302, 350, 498. He's been terrific, 4,300, 3,000, hitting down lineup a little bit. If people start looking, hey, that's a lefty-lefty matchup, and maybe I don't want to go to those guys, I think it's advantageous for us. So I think we can just roster the lefties at the bottom of the lineup. Obviously, we're taking the lefties at the top of the lineup. They're easy to get to with Rafi Devers, with Tristan Casas. 52.36 for Devers is just cheap. As I've talked about a bunch of times already, I'm just buying Rafi Devers for his home run upside anyway. So I don't really care that he's hitting 263, 333, which is still kind of good. It's just not the 290s that he hit last year, the 279 from 2 years ago. Last year it was 295, 358, 521, created runs 40% better than average. So this year there's a dip, 263, 333, 513. There's a noteworthy dip in the average, the on-base percentage, and therefore the run creation mark, but it's not tragic at all. He's hitting for 25 points more ISO. He's got 26 home runs already. He only hit 27 all of last year. Power-wise, he's more on this kind of a trajectory. He's probably not going to get to 38 home runs from 26 now. He might. 12 home runs over the next 2 months, that's not out of the question. He was a 279, 352, 538 hitter that year, 134 WRC plus. So like this year, in some ways, is in the middle of this season and this season. But I don't think Rafi Devers is at all diminished. Or I don't think he's diminished beyond the point where this price isn't more than covering the difference. So you just take the discount on Rafi Devers and thank them for it just from now till the end of the season. Tristan Casas has been absolutely rolling over the last month. Hit a home run last night for his 18th of the year as our overall home run pick. 3,900, 2,800. Go right back to the well with Casas. Cleanup spot going up against this pitching. Absolute smash spot for Tristan Casas. Up and down this Red Sox lineup is in play. Luis Urias, bottom of the lineup, another guy with second base eligibility. Second base and shortstop for 2,200 on the FanDuel slate. Yet another point of differentiation in those middle infield spots. We've talked a couple times about his massive power upside from late in the lineup. Like massive in like the mid-range sense. It's obviously not Aaron Judge. It's not Jordan Alvarez. It's a guy who hit 16 last year, 23 the year before, 23 the year before. So it's a guy who's got good, reliable mid-range power and doesn't do a lot else at the plate. But when he makes contact, he can mash. Reese McGuire's a playable catcher, point of differentiation late in lineups. Definitely a playable part of stacks. If you're going to Royals bats against James Paxton, I think it's viable. Given the run environment, given the 4+ run total that they're carrying, I do think it's viable. I think Paxton's given up a little bit in terms of power this year that you can maybe target with some of these Royals bats. It's definitely not great, but he's given up a 3.90% home run rate, 8.5% barrels, 39% hard hits. A little bit shaky later in the season after a really good start, too. Overall, he's at a 3.60 ERA and a 3.69 xFIP, a 27.3% strikeout rate to go with that shaky contact. But over the course of time, I broke it down in the article, 33.8% strikeout rate and a 3.60 xFIP for the month of May, 29.3% with a 3.12 in June, then dove all the way down to a 22.1% strikeout rate and a 4.20 xFIP for his July starts. So far, just one start in August, but a 15.4% strikeout rate and a 5.49 xFIP in that outing. That was 5 innings, 4 runs, 4 strikeouts, 3 home runs against the Blue Jays last week. Dicey. The Royals have a 92 WRC plus collectively against lefties. They are not good against lefties or righties, but they're notably not good against lefties. 8% below average for run creation, 23.3% strikeout rate, and only a 145 ISO in the split. So it is a good spot for Paxton for sure, but I think he's going to be the second highest owned pitcher on the slate. I'll have some. He costs only 9,300, 9,700. He projects as my third highest projected pitcher. He's easily the third best pitcher on the slate on talent. So it definitely makes sense to have loads and loads of James Paxton, but I think you can grab some of these Royals bats. Michael Garcia, cheap, 3,800, 2,900. Third base, that's not ideal on the DK slate, having to get him at third. Shortstop eligible on FanDuel puts another guy in play for that rotational position. Like I said before, though, I prefer rotating through second base. Just a dearth of talent at second base that doesn't really exist as much at shortstop. There's better options at short. But you do get, like, on FanDuel, you also do get, like, Mookie Betts eligibility at shortstop. So that's, some of a limit, or at second base and shortstop, rather. So that's somewhat of a limiting factor in just wanting to move those guys around too much. But Garcia's in play at least that way on FanDuel. 278, 325, 379, 100 ISO, and a 90 WRC plus. Not all that appealing other than just putting the ball in play. 20% strikeout rate, 49.6% hard hits. So he hits the ball pretty effectively when he makes contact, makes decent amount of contact. Against Paxton, I think there's a little upside there. Bobby Witt's their best player, 5,800, 3,900, 20 steals, 20 homers, 34 steals, 10% better than average creating runs. Righty going up against Paxton here, plenty of power, plenty of upside for Bobby Witt. Michael Massey, lefty, 2,800, 2,400. He's got 10 homers on the season, 304 plate appearances, 155 mid-range ISO, 76 WRC plus, so he's well below average, 24% below average. He strikes out a lot. I didn't look up his splits. Let's look up his splits. Oh, wait, let me use this tab. What's Massey done, lefty? He's an option just by virtue of where he hits in the lineup today anyway. Especially if you're building stacks of Royals. Like, you kind of just include him because of where he hits. Lefty, Massey. None of his home runs. So all 10 of the home runs came against righties. But against righties, he's got a 213, 263, 387 triple slash with a 73 WRC plus. Against lefties, 271, 339, 333. No power at all to speak of, with an 86 WRC plus in way fewer plate appearances. 248 plate appearances against righties, only 56 against lefties. So no power to speak of for Massey really again in same-handed matchups, but maybe he puts the ball in play a couple times for us. So a viable enough option, especially in stacks of Royals. 2,800, 2,400. Another movable part at second base at worst. Very, very cheap, easy enough to get to. So I think he's in play. Sal Perez definitely in play at the catcher position, 4,400, 2,700. Believable power upside. We've seen it for years. Only 17 homers this season, 10.2% barrels, 45.2% hard hits. That's down a little bit from last year's output. Obviously, the home runs are maybe on track to be around the mid-20s that he posted last year, but nowhere near the 48 that he hit 2 years ago. Was it 48? 48 was Semien. Oh, no, 48. All right. Both those guys had monster home run seasons 2 years ago. Similar mid-40s totals for positional excellence. MJ Melendez has been on a roll. Couple of homers over the last few days. Up to 12 on the season now. 159 ISO. Slowly but surely, that contact is creeping through. We keep focusing on it. 12.9% barrels. 51.8% hard hits. Keep it rolling, MJ. Lefty with MJ. I think we looked at it the other day, but I don't actively remember what it was. It's easy enough to get to. MJ lefty, 2 of his 12 homers. 230, 284, 350 versus 220, 305, 393. 120 ISO versus a 173. 71 ISO WRC plus versus an 89. It's ugly across the board for MJ. I just think it's a spot where since he's in the lineup hitting 5th, you just include him. 3,100, 2,700. Catcher eligible on FanDuel. Outfield eligible on DK. Freddie Fermin, another catcher in this lineup, 3,400, 2,700, having an effective season in 166 plate appearances, 303, 339, 542, tidy little ISO at 239, 9 homers in the small sample. Their best player for run creation, if we're being technical about it and not worrying about the small sample. I think he's on the board at 34.27, especially on FanDuel. That's a spot not a lot of people are going to play, even in stacks of Royals. People are just going to Sal Perez and MJ Melendez, I think, before they go to Furman. He's not really on people's minds. 8.15 in the home run model gives him a decent little upside. Olivares, Samad Taylor, Dairon Blanco, kind of flawed players through the bottom of the lineup. Mix and match parts in a lot of Royal stacks at best. So this one was, yes, definitely for Paxton, kind of by necessity. I don't really trust him, but you have to go there, at least for some shares in a mid-range sense. Enthusiastic yes about the Red Sox. So the Red Sox offense way up top. It's going to be really, really popular again. They've let us down a couple times, but there's a ton of good spots there. They're very cheap. They're easy to get to, and it's a killer spot. No love at all for either of the Royals pitchers, regardless of what comes out of that bullpen. And definitely mix and match your way through some Royal stacks. Contrarian position, if nothing else. Attack some of that ownership on Paxton, if nothing else. Stephen Leibowitz says they need to give Perez first base also. They did, didn't they? Yeah, Sal has catcher first base on DK. Thank you for mentioning that. I forgot about that. That is ultra valuable on the DK slate. Being able to say, all right, I'll take shares of Freddie Furman and Sal Perez and just put them at catcher in first. So, yeah, good call there. On FanDuel, obviously, it doesn't matter. First base, catcher, it's the same thing. Brian Rosian says, hey, Terry, really been missing your content on Stochastic, but it's great to see you're doing your own thing now. Congrats, man. Nobody does baseball better. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. Welcome. I'm glad you found us. It sounds like you just discovered that we were here. But, yeah, we've been doing this since opening day. Sorry that the word took so long to trickle down to you, but I soft launched it at the beginning. We're trying to just letting the snowball roll down the hill, picking up people as we go right now. But I appreciate the compliment, man. I'm really glad you're here. Hit the like button while you're here. Hit the subscribe button while you're here so you know when we go live on these shows. The site is rotoscouts. Follow the Twitter handle at rotoscouts. Like and retweet things that go out. Just helps build a little bit of audience there. So I appreciate that, Bri. Good to see you. Travis Duarte says, is that Washington-Philly game going to go? Yeah, I think so. Seems like it'll probably delay at some point. Hopefully they late start it and don't have a stop and start. That could derail Aaronola a little bit. But yeah, seems like it's going to play. Seems like everything's going to play. Dimitri says, new subs with some eyeballs there. That's good to know. Appreciate all the subscriptions, guys. I think we're over 300 and change. It's great. Let's keep on pushing up to 500. Jimmy James says, I won 5,000 because of Terry and Eric and Stochastic. Awesome. That's great, man. Good to hear. It's been a minute since then, but hey, that's great. Jimmy just discovered us too, I guess. He says, oh, it's the dude from Stochastic. What's up, buddy? Yeah, what's up, pal? As I said, we've been doing this. I'm the dude from Rotoscouts now. I'm the dude that is Rotoscouts right now. Maybe there'll be some other dudes that also Rotoscouts dudes soon. Or all you guys are Rotoscouts dudes. Slim says, I seen Rodman and Jamie Foxx hanging out in Florida during spring break. That's the only celebs I've seen in the street. That's a pretty good one. In 96? Wow. Jamie Foxx, Dennis Rodman in 96. That's a pretty killer one, to be honest. I would trade Philip Seymour Hoffman and smelling Matthew Modine's armpit for that one. That's at least fun. You follow him around for a little bit. In Florida, was that Florida during spring break? Was that like Lauderdale kind of spring break? Was that like South Beach? The whole club scene in South Beach? What was that? Now I'm curious. Yeah, Poe, DJ, and Stoner would also derail Corbin and any Corbin shares that you want to get to. Yeah, that's definitely would be a factor. If you get that stop and start in Philly, that could be disastrous overall for the pitching slate. Like if Nola goes 3 and then comes out and just does nothing, same with Corbin, there's going to be a ton of sinking ships. It might just be a day with a lot of really lousy pitching scores and winning it with bats across the board. That could easily happen. So I do think it pays to differentiate, get to different combinations, use alternative stack sizes, use some of these pivot points that we've talked about at key positions. Like if you're inclined toward 5-2-1s anyway on the DK slate, use that second base pivot as your one-off with some of these cheap second base options. And just move parts around that and build your 2s and your 5s in other spots. Or build your 2s and your 5s with cheap second baseman, cheap low on second baseman, cheap low on catcher. And use your 2s that way. And get to a premium one-off and a good 5-man. A lot of interesting ways to build. A lot of pivot points. A lot of multi-position guys in good spots. On both sites, really. Three dual position guys on the Red Sox. 2 dual position and a triple position on the Red Sox on FanDuel. 2 dual position guys on the Royals. A lot of moving parts here. So this is a game I definitely like for offense. like I said, Paxton is easily in play on the short slate, and it's a good spot going up against the Royals. I don't want to deny his talent or deny the great matchup against the Royals. I just do think there's an opportunity for them to get a little frisky with his struggles and with their potential to get a little frisky. Not that they've been good, not that they've been all that frisky. Let's move on from this one. Oh no, it's the last game on the slate. It's only 5:20. Have managed to go for over an hour already, and we're only at the fourth game out of 4. I was hoping to finish around 5:30ish and punch out then, but 6:40 start, by the way, if you guys weren't aware. Definitely an important note. A little bit of an early start, so as long as we're out of here by 5:40 in the next 20 minutes and get an hour to build, I think we're fine. Jimmy asks, do you guys have any optimizers of your own? Right now, Jimmy, it's just like content focused, doing rankings up on the site, writing a deep article every day, game by game, kind of like doing this kind of a breakdown in print and then doing the breakdown on the show. I've also got my home run picks and a power index and a stacks tool up on the site. So just kind of giving data right now. One of the people that's a friend of the site or actually multiple people that are friends of the site have built their own optimizers in Python, and the plan, I think, at some point will be either to get one of those guys on board or just rip off that idea and build my own thing in Python. But right now, no. But I do plan on probably providing like projections and stuff like that for football, at least. That's easy. We'll see what happens with basketball. It's just more difficult to cover. But we'll get into that as we go on. But yeah, right now, no individual optimizer. That's a little above our pay grade right now. But we'll get there. Rocks, Dodgers, did we get either of these? No lineups to speak of yet. This game doesn't start for another 5 hours, so that makes sense. So, yeah, Clay Kershaw, as I mentioned at the top of the show, 75 pitches, hasn't pitched since late June, dealing with a shoulder injury. I specifically hate shoulder injuries for pitchers, especially like aging, frequently injured pitchers like Clay Kershaw. Nothing about that situation, the fact that this is his first start back, that he didn't make any rehab starts, nothing about that is ideal here. But what that is going to do is lower his ownership in the best opportunity in all of baseball for a left-handed pitcher or for any pitcher. Just to reiterate, Colorado, as a team, their active roster has a 56 WRC plus in the split in like a mid-range sample. There's a couple short sample guys in there individually, but over the course of time, 892 plate appearances against lefties puts them 15th in the league. So right in the middle of baseball sample-wise, and just completely inept. 44% worse than average on the average creating runs against lefties. A 30.8% strikeout rate collectively against lefties. 140 ISO. They've been disastrous. The only guy in the lineup who's shown any kind of talent for hitting lefties is Nolan Jones, a lefty, who we looked at yesterday and discovered he's sitting at a 117 WRC plus, a 226 ISO, 68 plate appearances, not all against Clay Kershaw kind of lefty. So we're taking Nolan Jones's production with a grain of salt. Even at 70 pitches, even at 75 pitches, this is a killer spot for Clay Kershaw. I will happily pay the tax. At 10-2, 10-7, you're not getting him at a discount at all. Or maybe you arguably are if he was going full bore. That's obviously a little bit of a discount against this team, but you're not getting a discount for the 70-75 pitch version of Clay Kershaw here. I'm just going to pay it. This 35 inning or 35 point FanDuel projection that leads the slate is a 5 inning projection. If he goes 4 innings, I still think there's enough upside to maybe get there on just a wonky short slate with like no good pitching options, especially if you get Aaron Nola going bust. Let's say Aaron Nola goes a little bit sideways, just doesn't have a great game, has an okay game, gives up 4 or 5 runs. The national stack doesn't really go off. He pitches 6-7 innings still, but gives up 4 or 5 runs along the way. So just like a moderately effective start that still is probably one of the best options on the board. Even in 4 innings, Clay Kershaw's got the upside, the ceiling to be competitive with that Aaron Nola start. And then you're just looking to fade Paxton and then all the shit. Seems easy enough. I think it's a strong play worth making. Particularly as like the third most popular pitcher on, at least on the FanDuel slate. So I a lot of love for the Clay Kershaw opportunity, and just it's Clay Kershaw. There is that aspect of it. 2.55 ERA, a 3.29 xFIP when he was healthy early in the year, 105 WHIP, 27.7% strikeouts, an outrageously good 14.1% swinging strike rate, 30.1% CSW. No real issues with contact. 3.17% home runs is a little higher than I'd want it. I'd want it sub 3 for Clay Kershaw. Last year it was 2.03 on 4.2% barrels, so ran into a few extra barrels, couple extra home runs in his 16 starts. This is incidental contact, though. I mean, this is Clay Kershaw over time. 27.8 last year, 29.5 the year before, 4.7% walk. So arguably, he's walked like probably 10 extra hitters over that small sample so far. There's nothing not to like about him outside of the fact that he hasn't pitched in a month and a half and he's coming off of a bad shoulder injury and made no rehab starts and is only throwing 70 pitches tonight and is really expensive. Outside of that, it's great. Rockies bats, limited interest, even as like a hedge position, even as like a totally contrarian position. I do think it's worth going to because they'll be super low on, but they are the team that I was just reading off with all that ineptitude against lefties. Ryan McMahon loses all his quality in lefties, and he's their best hitter overall. Actually, Nolan Jones is probably now their best hitter overall. But Ryan McMahon's carried that mantle for a while, at least the best power bat with 19 homers at 215 ISO overall, but completely fails against lefties. Profar and Tovar, bad against everybody, also bad against lefties. Brendan Rodgers, mixed bag. At least it's from the right side of the plate. Very cheap, 2,500, 2,300. Potentially on that list of differentiators at second base. But again, it's just an example of how weak second base is overall on this slate. Last year, 13 homers and 581. The year before, 15 and 415. Okay, triple slashes. Below average run creation. Not an ideal option. Those are Coors Field numbers too, let's keep in mind. Elias Diaz, playable part at catcher. Potentially a differentiator at catcher or a rotational piece if you're one-off in catcher spots or if you're building two-mans through second base and catcher. I would say that, maybe Rogers-Diaz as a combo is kind of interesting as a two-man. Or if you wanted to go Rogers-Diaz, Nolan Jones as a three-man, I think that would be my favorite three-man on this team. I also like the idea of going with a Jones-Montero and Toglia three-man. I've talked a lot of times about Montero and Toglia's home run potential. They've obviously both been below the Mendoza line over a handful of plate appearances so far in the show. Below 250 on base percentages, a 28 and a 23 WRC plus so far. 3 homers, 2 homers. It's not been great, but I do believe in the power bats for both of these young players. Brenton Doyle, super inconsistent at the bottom of the lineup. It's a really low-end stack. I do think they're on the board just because we're throwing a lot of darts at a lot of different things on a 4-game slate, but they're very limited. They're going up against Clay Kershaw. They're very limited. Dodgers, on the other hand, going up against Ty Black. Black. I assume it's Black. I don't know that I've ever heard his name said out loud. Maybe I'll turn the game on later just to see how they're pronouncing it. So the way I wrote it up in the article, the Dodgers are an elite option against lefty Ty Black. Though he has been moderately effective at limiting home runs in his short career so far, Black has allowed a 2.56% home run rate on 6.9% barrels in 26 innings, 3 starts this season. He's allowed a 2.07% rate on 6% barrels in 44 and a third innings and 1 start last year. He is otherwise quite limited on the mound. He has a ridiculous 9.4% strikeout rate, a very good 3.4% walk rate, but a 4.85 ERA, a 4.76 xFIP, a 6.2% swinging strike rate. The comp that I made is he looks a lot like Adam Wainwright in terms of pitching to contact, the 2023 Adam Wainwright. Very, very limited strikeout upside. No real appeal here for this pitcher. Lefty going up against some of these Dodgers and these elite hitters. I am not optimistic about any kind of upside whatsoever for Black. I think you're just throwing Dodgers bats at him. They're by far the biggest favorites on the board. The Rockies, when I put the article together, were plus 313 dogs, minus 359 favorites for the Dodgers. Just outrageous. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, Ahmed Rosario, Max Muncy, Chris Taylor, Enrique Hernandez, bottom of the lineup option, just up and down. Chris Taylor, I think, is an interesting option. Third base, shortstop, outfield, third base, outfield on DK, 3,400, 2,600, 12 home runs, a 205 ISO, primarily getting that against lefties. 292 ISO against lefties this season. 7 of his 12 home runs on this side of splits. Late lineup looming power threat from Chris Taylor. So that's why I was saying I like Chris Taylor when Pojij and Stoner brought him up for his jock market options. Enrique Hernandez, as I said, diminished, but I do still like that spot in terms of a jock market play, a late lineup mix and match play who does have short and second base eligibility for 2,400 on FanDuel. Third base outfield, that kind of sucks, the positioning on the DK slate. I'd much rather have that option in the middle infield as one of those pieces. Miguel Rojas also fits that role on the FanDuel slate. He's a shortstop only on DK. He's just been a lot lower end overall, 55 WRC plus. Not that Hernandez has been good at 69, but he's at least got 7 home runs, and he's got a longer track record of success. Not in recent seasons so much. Well, 2 years ago was good. 20 homers in 585 plate appearances for Enrique Hernandez, a 110 WRC plus 2 years ago. 250, 337, 449. Only 402 plate appearances last year. Last year was pretty bad, only 6 homers. Weak triple slash, 25% below average grading runs. Not great over the last couple seasons, but a very cheap, movable part, if nothing else. Obviously, your quality is from here to here. Mookie's a superstar. Freddie's a superstar. Will Smith is a star caliber catcher and an excellent option at that position. I assume that Smith and JT Realmuto will be extremely highly owned given the massive upside for both of these offenses and their talent at the positions. So I think if you make any other decision at catcher with a lot of these teams, whether that's Andrew Neisner, whether that's Elias Diaz on the other side of this game, whether that's Keibert Ruiz from the Nationals, a lot of mix and match parts. That's why I said at the top of the show, I think catcher is actually oddly deeper. There's a lot more options overall in between second and short. Just given all these multi-position guys, there's a lot of options on the board at those positions. So there's a lot of flexibility there. But I think the talent depth, the chance for a home run and a big score is actually a little bit deeper at the catcher position. That's why I think they're both interesting to move around options and rotate through options on those while going to maybe just more of the obvious plays in the outfield and on the corners. Will Smith, I mentioned. Ahmed Rosario, especially if he's hitting cleanup. 4,100, 2,800. Second and short on DK. Love it. Shortstop only on FanDuel. I'll take it. 2,800. Very talented guy, just in terms of the tools, in terms of the skill. Hasn't had great output in the show. 11 homers, 18 steals last year was good. 11 homers, 13 steals the year before. Moderate output. Decent hit tool. Was better at creating runs those 2 years. Really diminished in that Guardians lineup for most of this season, but now a great spot in a really productive lineup. Rising tide effect, if nothing else, I think, on Ahmed Rosario. For the cheap prices and the positions, I'll definitely take shares. And then Muncy, 5,100, 3,600, 27 home runs on the season. Nothing to worry about. Just given all the available contact, I'm not worried at all about Max Muncy, assuming he's in the lineup and, the low-end batting average, anything like that. We're just trying to buy home runs there. So that's basically it, gang. This is enthusiasm about Clay Kershaw despite a potential limit of 70, 75 pitches. Tons and tons of enthusiasm about the Dodgers, but they'll be popular. But I do think there's a lot of opportunity to differentiate lineups with multi-position, with a lot of the cheap guys late in the lineup, pending confirmation of whatever the lineup is. Even with the lefty on the mound, if they go with any of the Hayward, Outman, David Peralta lefties in the outfield, I like all 3 of those hitters, especially with the idea that you get into the Rockies' pen pretty quickly. I like any of those guys if they're in play in the lineup. So basically whatever's in the Dodgers lineup can be in your lineup. Miguel Rojas, Austin Barnes are lower end options, though, at the bottom of that lineup, but they're both playable parts on this slate. What else we got here? Dennis says, I guess black like Bach. That is Bach and it rocks. It's a rock Bach of Bach that he was learned in the school called the School of Hard Knocks. I almost got through that. Chuck Deuces says, play Beaumont FanDuel. He's massively underowned for the slate context, 15%. I like that spot quite a bit, Chuck. That's a good call. Just go back to that spot real quick. We were talking about the Phillies going up against Patty Corbin here, and the super targetable Patty Corbin. Alec Bohm for the season. First of all, he's hitting second in that lineup. First and third base eligible on both sites. 4,400, 3,200. Underpriced for a guy who was a kid that they expected to hit. First overall pick from a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Hitting very well in a nice little breakout season. 293, 345, 440. 12 homers on the board. 13% better than average creating runs. Wasn't bad last year in 631. 280, 315, 398. 2% worse than average creating runs. 13 homers for the course of the season. So he's on pace to show growth over the course of time. And obviously, significant growth from his limited 417 plate appearances in 21. Took a nice step forward last year, big step forward this year. I like that call quite a bit if he's going to be low owned. Just Phillies top to bottom it's a great spot going up against Patty Corbin. AccuWeather says 78% chance of rain in Boston at 7, going up to 86 by 8 p.m. Yeah, but then I think it got clean after that, if I'm not mistaken, was the report. Like showers blowing through, like, you know, from 7 to 8:30, and then clean after that, probably starting a delay kind of a thing. That was last I saw. Maybe it's changed since then. As always, major asterisks on any of the weather forecasting of just go follow Kevin Roth and any of the other experts out there, because those are the guys who really know. And those are the guys who I'm just, you know, I can read it to you guys, but I don't know any better than anybody else. That said, I like embracing risk around weather situations, particularly, as I've said many times, with the ability to switch out of it on FanDuel, that albeit on a very limited slate today, so limited opportunities to do it if you do get that late PPD. You're basically looking at just switching into the last game if possible. But I do embrace risk a lot of the time around those situations, particularly when it's a killer spot like the Red Sox bats today. If that chases away ownership, that's just advantageous for us, and you hope you don't get the disaster of the game going PPD. If it does play, you get great bats, hopefully at a little bit lower ownership than they would be. One word, Roth. Yeah, absolutely, Pudgy Jen. That's who I follow. I forget the other guy's name who used to do it. I don't think he does it anymore. But that dude used to be such a fence sitter. It drove me nuts. You'd be like, well, maybe not. I don't know. Looks like rain. Might be sunny. It's like, pick a side, man. At least Roth takes sides. That's what I like about Roth. He does do his like color scheme and everything. And he kind of sometimes hedges his position. But a lot of times he'll take a distinct side. Tim Evans says, first season playing MLB DFS. Thanks so much for all the content. It's been so helpful. Do you play much MLB Showdown? And if so, how in the hell do you approach it? I actually don't, Tim. I don't play all that much Showdown. What I would think about specifically in Showdown is utilizing the multiplier spots in a way where it's advantageous with the flow of a lineup, right? So I want to put my guy who's going to be driving in the runs and hitting the home run ahead of in the big multiplier spot, ahead of guys, and I'm thinking FanDuel terms here, ahead of a guy who he'll be driving in. So like go with the prime scorer in the big spot. This is kind of obvious, but sometimes it's not. And a lot of times I like to look like down lineup. So I'll put like, you know, 6 hitter. If it's a 6 hitter with power, pop him into the prime multiplier spot, and then the guy he might immediately drive in, let's say like the best on base percentage guy from the 2 or 3 guys immediately ahead of him in the lineup, put him in the next multiplier spot, the lower multiplier spot, and then fill out either with another guy from that stack, or maybe on DK, I think you can play pitchers if I'm not mistaken. I'm less familiar with the DK Showdown format for baseball. It's been a while. But on FanDuel, it's multiplier, smaller multiplier, 3 positions, I think, if I'm remembering it correctly. So that's kind of how I approach it, and then I'll use like 1 guy from the stack and then 2 guys from the other team. But not my favorite format by a wide stretch. I do like Showdown on for football slates. We'll talk a lot about that. That's where I really like Showdown. Did very well last year in Showdown for football. So we'll get into we'll do specific shows for Showdown for football when that comes around. But yeah, baseball, woof. That's tough. That's like playing cash games for baseball. Not my fave. All right, guys. Coming up on 5:40. Solid little show for a 4-game slate. Appreciate everybody hanging out. Tim Evans, you're welcome, buddy. Thank you for coming by. Just appreciate everybody coming and hanging out. Like I say every time, if I'm just here talking to myself, it would be a little bit weird. So it's really you guys that deserve the thanks. Hit the like button for me. Hit the subscribe button for yourself, and get the notifications. Show times change, vary a little bit, but I really appreciate the hell out of all of you guys. Hit me up in the Discord for any questions, anything like that. I'm always hanging around. Otherwise, good luck out there. Somebody go win something. I'll see you.